having me. I was rudely interrupted, but thank you for having me.
So Al, you have quite an incredible story, and super happy that you can share it with us. There's a lot of ground to cover, so why don't we just start at the top? And what I'm going to do is read your bio, and then we'll go through some of these slides, okay? But I'm just going to go to as I normally do, to a screen over here. And so I'll read your short bio. Al Diaz is a native New York artist best known for his friendship and collaboration on the SAMO Graffiti that appeared in Lower Manhattan from 1978 to 1980 with Jean-Michel Basquiat, a prolific and influential first-generation graffiti artist who would later become a text-based street artist. Diaz's career spans 5 decades. Al appears in numerous publications and films and has served as a guest speaker on the subjects of graffiti culture, the New York art scene of the 1970s and 80s, and the teenage years of Jean-Michel Basquiat. Some of his most recent appearances include the Brooklyn Museum, the Smithsonian Museum of African American History, and the Barbican Arts Center in London. The BBC's David Shulman award-winning documentary on Jean-Michel Basquiat, Rage to Riches. Yes, and Sarah Diver's award-winning documentary on the teenage years of Jean-Michel Basquiat, Boom for Real. Diaz, along with Mariah Fox Hausman, has recently published a book on the history of SAMO graffiti, SAMO since 1978 on Irie Books. And you currently live in Brooklyn.
Yeah, I've been living in Brooklyn for, I don't know, at least about 20 years.
Oh, forgive me. So, Al, one of the things, you sent me an image that starts off this conversation, and man, it's always like, I don't know, this fuzzy feeling in me about discovering writers who went to art and design, especially first generation writers.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was a nice surprise. And one of the first pictures we have, which I mentioned, taken by Flint Gennari, is you at the Terrace of Art and Design.
Yes, it was the Terrace. And that's me. It's probably 74. I'm in the 10th grade, so it's 74. And there's 7, and there's Chris Lee, Spike Lee's younger brother, wearing the 2 badges, but there's a streak in front of him. I don't know what happened to that image. And I forgot the kid who was giving me the devil horn.
Let me interject and say that Spike Lee's brother used to write, rest in peace, he used to write Shadow. He
was a graffiti. So it's a bunch of us graffiti guys, doing what we did. And and we certainly covered the every inch of the school's bathrooms, and the hallways not so much. There were some tags like on the desks and stuff, but the hallways were kept pretty clean. But the bathroom, even the inside of the urinals were marked. There was the ceiling, the floor, everything was marked. But it was definitely a meeting ground and a destination for other writers who did not go to art and design to come and get their black book signed. And I think the black book concept probably was created in art and design. I'm not, don't quote me on that, but I have a sneaky suspicion that it was, because it was art supplies, and that's what we did. We sit around and draw our pieces.
Right. And so, it's safe to say that perhaps before the black books, there was always Writer's Corner, right? And there were walls and trucks and anything.
Everything. The trucks were a really good vehicle to target. Buses were very easy to tag and hitch as well. We used to ride the back of the buses. Right. But that truck right there was famously parked out across the street from 188 Writer's Corner on Audubon and 188th Street in Washington Heights, which is arguably the spawning ground for all graffiti culture, not including the Philadelphia. But this is around the same time, and this truck has been featured in photographs by John Nahr, and also this particular photograph was at Beyond the Streets in the Wall Writers section of the show. which is
So
the
that,
the early graffiti, first
right.
generation
So that,
uptown writers.
there are a couple questions I want to ask you specifically about this, about what one got you into graffiti in the first place, right?
Yeah.
And second to that was, how did you find style, your style? Because if you look at this truck, actually is interesting because I would imagine that several years of writing on it, and of course you start seeing really like simple rudimentary writing, and then you start seeing style, meaning your uni-Y tag. So I want to know the beginning of you being interested in writing your name and getting up, but also the evolution of that style and what was informing that style.
Okay, I was first introduced, or visibly, the first place I actually saw graffiti writers and graffiti on the walls was up in Washington Heights. I mean, there was gang graffiti. I grew up, I was born and raised in the Lower East Side, but at that time, this is 1971, there was no real this kind of graffiti that was coming out of there. And I had a cousin who I was very close to, my cousin Gilbert, and we hung out a lot, and I would go there just to hang out, and I was excited by this phenomena. I was like, oh, that's cool. I've never seen this before. Something to partake in, something that you're looking for an identity at the age of 12, and it seemed like I was down with that. I like the writers had a certain style, a swag, a way of being. The music they listened to, the way they dressed, etc., etc. And I admired that, and I wanted to be like those guys. And that's really what it was. It was an attraction to a certain subculture, or like this secret organization that I didn't see where I was, where I had grown up. And as a result, I ended up importing the graffiti and influencing kids I grew up with in the Jacob Riis housing projects. Because it was all new to us, and we didn't have a subway nearby. It was either First Avenue or Delancey Street, which is avenues and avenues away from the FDR and Avenue D. So you don't have that conduit, that like primitive internet, if you will, back then. So that you could see what's going on in other parts of town. But me, and there was these two other guys in the nearby, in the housing project near me, that were hanging out in Harlem, and they seemed to import like a Harlem style, like a la Cool Cliff 120, and that. And then I guess gradually other people who were hanging out in other parts of town and had seen this stuff were bringing it to the Lower East Side, and within a year or two there was a lot of writers. But the fact that when I started I had like very little competition made my tag and the pieces I did on the FDR super visible. So I was able to sort of like establish a name for myself.
What was your first name? What was the name?
Bomb One was my tag.
Always Bomb One.
Always. I'm not one of those people that have 15 tags. I mean, I did the same old thing, but that was entirely different.
And why? A quick question. Actually, this will be a very good tidbit for all the graffiti enthusiasts, because when you were coming up, and you guys were coming up, you guys called it one hits or
we call it hitting. We call it
hitting.
We didn't say
right?
tagging.
It wasn't bombing.
It was not yet. But I mean, eventually, people started bringing that. It's because remember, we're the first generation, and we're creating the rules and the language. We're making the slang up for it.
Right.
So, but tagging was not that. That came a little bit later, and we certainly didn't call ourselves taggers
or graffiti artists, right?
Yeah. I mean, I call myself a graffiti. I think that's a phase 2 thing. That the fear of the word graffiti, but. No, we said, you a graffiti artist, kind of accent that. But graffiti artists or writer, but mostly writers. We were writers,
Writers, right? Yeah. What you do, which is to write.
Now,
the one thing that I was alluding to before with the truck was about the genesis of style, right? And how Again, if we go back and look at this truck, there's some heavy hitters: Mike 171,
Pitch,
Clyde,
Snake,
Snake,
AG 170.
SJK. Yeah,
SJK, who's like, he was one of the first all city guys. I heard Jester One, who the fantastic and iconic Jester One, said
yeah,
that he gave props to SJK. He said, I wanted to write like SJK 171, you know, because
nice,
he was everywhere. I think they hit every station in New York.
nice.
Yeah.
So the style, I think particularly you can see it with the uni wide. This is a little more contemporary, but it seems to me that you picked up on the Broadway elegant style.
Well, there's Broadway elegant, but we also, it was also referred to as a Philly platform style, because
Philly
if you
platform
look at,
style. Yes.
yeah, if you look at all the, oh yeah, Philly they call it too. But if you look at, it's all serifed and it's elongated, and some of the letters have a curl to it, like the E has a slight bend to it when it, you know. So,
Right.
but all these styles were kind of, they kind of fused. There was a little bit of this, a little. There's probably some Brooklyn, like that arrow and the stars that are done, you know, stylist like an italicized or something.
Yeah.
And everybody was, I mean, like Brooklyn at that time had a very cursive style. If you look at like Super Strut or the Black Eye, Black Diamond, Black Dice, I think it was, or all the Ebony Dukes and the yeah, just the like Brooklyn Fort Greens or Bed-Stuy writers. They all had a lot of hearts and arrows, and it you know, a cursive sort of angle to it or something.
Right.
Yeah, but eventually, you know, we all kind of borrowed from here and from there.
Right.
And
No,
phase
I actually love the genesis of writing, you know, as everybody explains it and where it comes from, like kind of the genealogy of tags and tidbits, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's such a unique thing for typewriting and typography and communication, you know. And it's always an interesting conversation, like you said, because you look at who you're attributing it to, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing about like the history or the genealogy of it is that it's not straightforward, you know, cut and dry history. It's because there's so much going on at once, you know. And people influencing one influences another, which it's just such a, you know, like a mixture. So it's never like a easy story to tell. It's very convoluted. It's not an easy story to tell.
Sure. Well, I want to transition into a different part of your story, and you know, the kind of reinvention of Al Diaz and writing, the act of writing, and how you teamed up after Art and Design. You said you went to City as School, the one that was located in Brooklyn and downtown Brooklyn, and it's interesting because this in itself is such a avant-garde concept, right? For two people to take on the same moniker. And today in contemporary graffiti, we see crews that do something in that vein, so to speak, like somebody like One Up, right? A group of people taking the same moniker. Different tactics about getting up, but to say that you were a precursor for that kind of a concept in graffiti is really interesting. But also that, you know, you and Jean-Michel, you knew him intimately when he was young, and then also as you guys came up in the downtown scene. So give me a quick picture of what you guys were like in high school, and you know, the publishing and the downtown scene.
I met Jean-Michel after transferring to City as a School, which was an experimental alternative high school back then. And it was for kids like myself who were you know, smart enough but had some issues finishing school for whatever. In my case, it was truancy because I was busy writing graffiti or, you know, smoking weed or whatever. But everybody had a similar story, and he ended up there as well. We became became friends soon. I mean, like quickly, because we there was very few Hispanic or kids that you know, like myself, that were Hispanic, that spoke Spanish and English as well, and we that kind of like was a bonding thing, just being bilingual, you know, and then we shared a lot of interests, a lot of common interests: music, smoking weed, partying, and girls, whatever, just teenage stuff. So we I mean, also intellect, you know, we had a bit of like stuff that we shared intellectually, like what we like to read and beat stuff, and just whatever things of that nature. Anyway, so we ended up working on a school newspaper together. I mean, that we sort of initiated. We wanted to do it, so we were you know, talked some teachers into helping us do this, and eventually I mean, it's such a weird story to tell, but this SAMO thing was a joke, was a kind of, it started out as a private joke between us, that we used to refer to doing the same thing all the time as doing the SAMO, including smoking the same weed or hanging out with the same people, etc., etc. So it was this kind of code thing, and it became kind of a slang amongst our inner circle. And then it was in January of 1978 that we had we put out a newspaper issue, and it had to do with, the theme of the paper was like spirituality, spiritualism, cults, religions, etc., etc. And Jean wrote this really funny spoof on a guy who sold religions. It was like a kiosk where you could buy a religion, and it was pretty funny. And he named the religion of the day SAMO. And I mean, to us, it was very funny because we all had been throwing that word around, and, which was, yes, originally a kind of a play on same old shit or same old thing, etc., etc. But it no longer meant that. It was this, now it was this religion. So I had taken a kind of a hiatus from graffiti for that year, because it was kind of, I felt that it was being kind of becoming pedestrian and played out. Remember, I started writing, you know, long before that, and it was, at that point, it was like a big chunk of my life, and I was just like, I want to do something else. So I saw this as an opportunity to do like a play on pray, or one of those kind of like mysterious religious, quasi-religious.
So let me interject and let people know, if you don't know about pray was either someone or a group of people that would scratch the word pray everywhere in the subway system, from phone booths
to phone booths, and all over the city.
So, yeah, it was all over the city. I'm sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
Saves pray. So, because I wanted to do something like different, something that was, you know, not a tag again, because it was like everybody was writing. So I introduced the idea of let's take this to the street, and we started with a pamphlet. We made this pamphlet with like testimonials of like, it was all drawings. There was no photo. It was just a spoof on this kind of, it was, you couldn't tell whether it was a religion or a drug or something. It was this product. That's why two people could push it, because it didn't have a face. It wasn't a person. It was a product. And we were basically, what I like to, the way I like to describe it is, and I don't think we could at that time articulate this, but we were playing with hype. We were creating a product that did not exist and trying to sell it as if it did. And within a year, I mean, just, you know, together we'd elaborate on the idea. It sort of, you know, it became clearer and clearer what we were trying to do as we did it. So like, oh, SAMO as an alternative to, you know, to bourgeois fantasies. SAMO as an alternative, or as an end to mass-produced individuality. Whatever we could come up, and linguistically making it sound, you know, smart. Because we were trying, that's the other thing, is the two of us were kind of like precocious guys who wanted to be noticed as the two smart guys and funny guys.
What, at that point, were you putting it on the street though? Or
this is when we started putting it on the street. Yeah, it went immediately to the street. Right after that article and that pamphlet, which we did actually hand out to people. The next thing was like within days, I was writing it. Both of us were. So I had at that point introduced Jean-Michel to graffiti culture.
Right.
Because, like, you know.
So an important question to ask is, who was the most, or who was, I think, the most creatively inclined? Who was art directing?
I don't know.
Was it like a mutual talent
I
that you
think it
guys
was. I
shared?
think it was really 50-50 because I mean I had been an artist all my life, and and graffiti was second nature to me. So I think I had that edge. Jean could was constantly drawing, and he was very good with language and so, but I think we would like like check each other like, no, that's too corny, or nah,
Right.
that's whatever. But we were editing each other, so I believe it was a really 50-50 thing.
One of the interesting things about the SAMO is that, and the whole concept, and we discussed this earlier, is that Flint was an influence on you
Well,
guys.
Flint was definitely an influence to me. I saw I kind of left that out, but to backtrack, the boilerplate that I used for the look,
the
look
font,
of saying the font, the ellipsis, the use of a dot 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 was because I had been in school and I was friends with Flint, and I just thought that that was a perfect format for what we were doing. I didn't think that I thought if anything, I'd be paying homage to Flint's, concept, because what we were doing was pretty different from Flint, but it was just, it kind of had that look, yeah. So it was perfect for what we were doing. And
so one of the things you caught people's
my
attention, right?
Right. So within a year of doing it regularly, targeting, like example, if we were saying something like the same as an end to vinyl punkery, like a spoof or an insult to like the commercialization of punk rock, we would write that outside of Trash and Vaudeville, which was like, a uniform, like, get your punk rock uniform here. So we targeted, if we had some comments about the art world, we'd do it in Soho, etc., etc. It was site appropriate, if you will. Anyway, within a year, and we're writing every day, coming up with something. Sometimes he does them, sometimes I do them, sometimes we do them on our own. Generally agreeing on what it is that we're writing. I mean, not always planning it out together, but we already had it was already a standard for what we were doing. And within a year, this article, we ended up in the Village Voice. Much to, I put up a fight about it because Jean-Michel somehow, and he met with this guy, Philip Faflick, the writer, who was a total gentleman, and he's just, he wanted to get the story. But at the same time, we were communicating with the Soho Weekly News with Stephen Sabin, who's a writer of some consequence, who the editor from the Soho Weekly.
Yeah, I remember him.
He was very pissed and very hurt because he had printed 3 of our, like, we were doing a cat and mouse thing, sending these obscure kind of weird messages to him, because he had printed something like, who's this SAMO guy? So we just started, teasing them. And then I think we actually told them that we were going to do an interview. And then all of a sudden we just turned around and went. Faflick had offered us $100 to split. And we're kids. I mean, Jean-Michel was 17, I was 19. So we're like, yo, let's just take that. Anyway, I wasn't all that eager to do it. I thought it was kind of like we were selling out, and that once we had done this, I figured once we expose ourselves, it's over. You can't do it anymore, because the idea was this anonymous entity. And then once you expose yourself, it's done. I mean, we have accomplished what it was we set out to do, which was to sell a product that didn't exist. Hey, guess what? We did it. So that was kind of the end. And
so the cat's out the bag, right? And basically, and I remember your tags very well in Soho, and then of course, given that we ran with similar people, I was, oh yeah, it's 2 people. We kind of figured it out that it was you and Jean-Michel. But what is it about? That's just, I know this. I felt like this slide should have been a little later on, but it speaks to what would eventually happen, right? That there would be a parting of ways with you and Jean-Michel about the name SAMO, but also you know, his rise in the art world.
Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, that was kind of, it was, I mean, it was, it's to be expected, really. That would definitely, you know, it was going to happen. So, it was two strong egos and two young, you know, young guys. And Jean-Michel was very, very focused and deliberate and,
And calculating. He was incredibly
he was,
calculating.
he was calculating when it came to, like, I mean, he was motivated by fame, which is, I mean, not
Yeah.
to take away from his talent, but being motivated by fame was not something was not part of who I am. Fame is something that will come to, if you do what you do really well and continue to do it, that, you know, that's kind of a byproduct. But if it becomes the main focus, I don't know how to deal with that. I've never thought that way. But he was very thirsty for fame, and he did everything. He put everything in place for that. You know, I mean, it was very, like you said, calculating is exactly
Right,
the
because
word.
the writing has a ceiling, doesn't it? Right, the messaging, especially since you guys kind of exploited it and outed yourselves with it.
Yeah. Which I mean, that's exactly how I felt. I felt like, you know, outing it is exploiting it and becoming, making it so that it's not. It's so that the project is completed. It's done. Once you've, you know, been outed, it's done. You know, this, what's the fun of doing it anymore? It's just then it seems like it's just, you know, like it's self-indulgent. You know. So yeah, that was
But
the
there was
parting of
also
ways,
there was
and after that he used well, it was local fame, because it was, you know, I mean, it was the Village Voice. It wasn't exactly, you know, world news, but he used the local fame that it had gotten to, yeah, as kind of as a springboard for an intro to the art world, and at that point, I started, you know, I got more involved in playing music and doing other things during the 80s. So
right,
it was
and
not.
it was a lively time for you because you guys were you're coming out of that whole punk era, the Club 57, Mud Club,
Right.
really
Of which
exciting
we were
times.
part of all of every one of those elements. I mean, CBGB's, the
Yeah.
Club 57. Um, I'm still friends with some of those people. Um, the Mud Club. Yeah, we were regulars there.
Yeah.
It was an exciting time. It was, you know, a good time to be young. It was easy to live in the East Village with, you know, on not having a job and somehow like being or not having a real job, and just having, you know, just living to have fun. It was a good time. I mean, it was also a dangerous time. New York was a shithole. I mean, we all know that it was not like, you know, there was nothing safe or
Right.
secure about New York.
Thank you for saying that, because it's important not to romanticize it. And because I often get asked about that period, and people are like, you know, fawning about this period, and it's, man, it was tough. It was grimy.
No, it was real tough.
And
I think it was in '86 or '87. I got my grill knocked out. These are all fake. I got my grill knocked out with a bat, you know, over some drug stuff. So it was not. I was 5 days in intensive care. Basically, my life, you know, was it was almost ended. Put it that way. It was pretty close to death experience, and I was bitter after that. And then after, you know, I had some bad years as a result of that.
right, tell me about your venture into music. What was that like for you?
Well, in the early '80s, I started playing music. It was fun. It was creatively enriching, and it was fulfilling, because
What kind of music? Club music?
I was
Rock?
playing some club music, some like no wave. I played with a guy, avant-garde musician named Elliot Sharp, who's pretty well respected in that world, and I learned a lot about playing with other musicians. I played with Liquid Liquid,
Yeah,
most famous for Cavern, which was the
love that song.
which was the blueprint for White Lines.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let me tell you this about Cavern. You know, for me, the minute I heard it, I visualized a montage of New York City subways and trains. And
Wow.
I've always associated it with trains, with movement and speed. And it's such an amazing beat, especially on the dance floor too, especially if you're like top rocking, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. It was. I'm still in touch with Richard McGuire, the guy.
Um, uh, um, yeah, I lost your
I'm
reception.
still in touch with Richard McGuire. Yeah, from the bass player. He's still a good friend from Liquid Liquid,
So,
and I played with a bunch of other
so,
down like
so
yeah.
as you, let me ask
I'm
you
sorry.
something.
Yeah.
As right, you're having this foray into music, you're having a different challenges in your life, and this concept that had you very active and involved in the scene, and kind of just again connecting you back to graffiti. This concept SAMO, again, it's and I'm glad we're talking about this because it's perhaps overly and graciously identified with Jean-Michel only.
Right.
And it's important that as we celebrate him, we celebrate you as well. And, you know, I've often felt that there are two guys in particular from that generation, that you and LA2 with Keith Haring, that were say instrumental early on in kind of the outsider kind of adopting to this kind of street graffiti culture, so to speak, connecting themselves to it, and granted, you know, on the strength of their own talents, they succeeded. But if it wasn't for graffiti, and again, your part in this creation of Samo, you know, would his career been would he have been the painter that he is today? Uh, uh, do you think?
You know, it would have gone in a. I'm not going to say he wouldn't have been successful, but it would have gone in an entirely different way had we not done the same old graffiti, because that was his entry, or his, you know, that was his meal ticket in the very beginning, of which
What was it?
you know,
Was there anything pointing stylistically to the work that he would start practicing?
um no, other than not really. I mean, it was he. I think
Yeah.
what he did was he made a 180 on that. He threw away like those faces that you see in some of the samos that look like kind of like I don't know, like Peter
Mm-hmm.
Max or something. There's some
Mm-hmm.
psychedelia to that, right? With the bubbles coming in. That was for him was a adolescent period, and he completely abandoned that, and he turned around and started doing these childish drawings, you know, like childlike drawings, and then using some text, which he had. I don't think he had previously been writing a lot. Jean-Michel always wrote. He had notebooks filled with writing beginnings of poems. So I think what it did was it kind of like gave him more of a direction, because after that he would incorporate those writings with these childlike drawings, and tell
Right.
stories that way, and that became his vernacular, you know. Um,
Right.
but I think that it was a natural progression from the same old, you know, like that helped. That was some like a bridge from one thing to
Right.
the next. I totally. I
And
mean, you can see it. You can see it. I'm not just. It's not
I
just.
and to that point, it's amazing to think, you know, from that point to now, things that may seem inconsequential, right? Like, you know, this tarp that this woman's holding up that comes to the market, the art market. What's your take on that, and whether or not you felt like you deserved the space in that, or did you not care
Well,
about it?
it was. You know what? I know the story behind this tarp, and what it is just it's motivated by greed. I mean, he did that. He was up at the Stratmanis loft when he did people we both knew, but I mean, he just did it on dad was a paint there. The father of these two friends of ours was a painter, and he just wrote it on. It's like he had a drop cloth to keep the dust out of the room or whatever, and he wrote it there, and it's like one of the family members, that not the owner, not the actual owners, but one of the family members saw that as inventory and sold it, without permission. So I think that that's pretty sleazy, actually.
So, a question: does this set a precedent for the word SAMO and your history as part of SAMO, in terms of one, in the art history, so to speak, but also in the marketplace?
Well, I think, yeah, I don't know how much, I forgot how much that sold for. It was like 25K or something like that.
No, they said 70K in the
70K. All
yeah.
right, well, either way, of course it does, but way before that, it was the whole mistelling of the history had started to really eat at me, and it was probably around 2000 and maybe a little after the film A Radiant Child came out, and then I started to try to straighten the story out, and I think I've been very aggressive about to tell it, because first of all, people thought that SAMO was just like his nickname or something. Like, they didn't realize that it was a format, and it was a creative collaboration that had a very rich history, and it was kind of quite clever, the fact that it was done by a 17 and a 19-year-old. And it was really important for me to clarify and to explain that what that SAMO was,
right,
to people who were throwing that around having no clue, because it becomes an obligation. If you're alive and no one bothers to ask you, what your birth date is, it becomes a little irritating when he's like, dude, I'm right here. You could, you don't have to tell this mistold story. And one of my pet peeves is like irresponsible storytelling and bad history, especially because I've been around, so these people can do any fact checking they wanted, all they have to do is look me up. And so I took it upon myself to straighten the story out.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're back around, and that you have afforded us the time to talk about it. But also, again, going beyond just that you are back, creating your own art. You're back and really clearly stating it, with or without your approval. That's a very direct commentary. Is there any kind of legal rights to the term SAMO, copyright?
Well, there is some there. I have not only a petition that I put against the Bosquet estate when they tried. Well, they did. They put in an application for straight out ownership of SAMO. No coming to Al Diaz to split this, to talk about the it was I found out that they had done this like 5 days after the application was filed. So it was somebody had just on a fluke had come across this information and gave it to me. So I had to lawyer up and put in my own application and a petition against their application as well. So we're still waiting for a judgment, a decision. But at first they rejected both of us, but I had to show more reason for using it, and purely from a commercial point of view, which is why I started doing merch stronger and stuff like that, because it's the trademarks and copyright is more interested in who needs it, who's actually using it. So that made me much more aggressive about.
Gotcha. But regardless of that, you've actually been in the studio and moving on, and moving beyond SAMO, so to speak, as well, practicing in the studio with these collages with the wet paint series. And when I saw this, I was like, oh shit, this is really cool, because it was just last year we did a show at the museum with wet paint, Persuade, which we talked about.
Right.
And but I want to know how you arrived at this with your work and coming back to typography and incorporating collage and abstract field painting.
I think it was about 2009. I was just, I mean, I had to always have my eye on those wet paint signs, because they are nice. They're, for the most part, especially the older ones, were pretty handsome and well-made product. And I thought it was a shame that they would end up in the garbage. So I just started collecting them, and my first instinct was to do anagrams with multiple signs. Not much you can do with one. So I generated, I don't know, maybe 900 words. I actually used a online anagram generator for
Wow.
the seven. There's seven characters, but if you turn the W upside down, you have an M, and if you turn the P upside down, you have a lowercase p. So I did that, and then I think I exhausted. They started becoming tongue twisters, because there's same sound. It's all the same sound. So it's like alliteration and tongue twisters. So I got a little tired of that, and I think it was working with Jilly Ballistic, the Brooklyn-based subway street artist, who uses images from World War I and World War II people gas masks. I started working with her, and I wanted to come up with captions for her images. So I had to, that's a perfect example right there. I had to start incorporating some of the subways. I thought it was time. It was the organic time to incorporate subway icons, like the letters of the trains, the turnaround U, or the no reentry red dot with a slash. I use that as an O, and some of the numbers, 2 and 4 most. So I was able to generate an alphabet. It's still a constrained alphabet. I don't have a K, an H, a V, an X, or a Y, but I work around it, and and I create all kinds of messages without those letters. Because one of the rules I have for myself is I can't just make a Y or make an X, although I have done it. I did it once.
Right. But also, what's interesting, Al, is that they're like little sonnets, right?
They're
poetic.
all kinds of things. They're sonnets. Yeah. They're maybe some of them are prayers. Some of them are protests. Some of them are like a journal. This is one of my default lines that I just recently did on Houston Street at First Street Green Art Park. Yeah, that's it right there. But they really are a journal, like and serve many different purposes. I like the vote thing was for Michael Preve's vote initiative, Give a Damn Vote initiative, and they've become tools for me. Sometimes I just cut up the letters and use them in an abstract way, But I mean, the message thing is just an extension of my history of doing text graffiti with SAMO. It's the need for me to express a message. Is not just a logo, not just a tag, but something to go with it. Share an idea, bring something to light.
What I like about this, Al, is that this is a good setup for me, because my next talk is with SP1, Greg LaMarche, who I don't know if you're familiar with his work, his kind of collage.
Yeah,
yeah. So I love this connection to graph, and also how one uses typography.
Yeah, I mean, typography as a drawing element, if for lack of a better way of describing it, it becomes a tool. Like a line, or
So Al, so now you're back, right? And you're doing more public murals. You're more engaged with the street art scene right now. And are we having a rediscovery of you and your history as SAMO, and not that now you could actually leverage that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was, I had a few quiet years, and then I had to, it's like it was time. It was time. So sometimes, some of us, some of us we don't peak when we're 22. Sometimes we have to wait a little while. So.
Right. It's interesting. It's interesting, Al, as you read the line here, SAMO as yet another brand you've come to know.
And trust.
To what?
It's kind of a run-on. That one you could keep adding to it. That's
right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's at Crash's place in the Bronx. That particular that's a 60-foot run-on of just 8 different colors or 9 different colors and all different SAMOs. The longer SAMOs. Narrative.
And how in terms of the public response, are you getting any feedback from this kind of work?
Oh yeah, no. I'm at this point. I'm actually able to make a living from my art. It's I was a carpenter for 38 years. Besides a musician and all that, and always being an artist, in order to pay my bills, I couldn't do it from just doing that. But now I'm a full-time artist. That's what I do, and I do some educational stuff. It's all art related, and I mean, at this point I'm quite happy doing that because that's basically, I guess, what I've always wanted to do. But like I said, sometimes we're not ready, or we're not not ready until later in life. In my case, that's the way it worked out. But that's Jason Newsted and Danny Minnick there in a Miami. That was during Art Basel, on the outside of Art Miami or Art something. That's me and Dave Navarro with a print that we did. That's in that case I made a Y with cut up eyes or something because I needed to. It's a milk container.
Is that what it is? Oh yeah.
It's a milk container that says, the missing kids on the milk container. This is missing elements in our culture, and that was Dave's idea. And He had a few different artists do it, but ours sold really well.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a SAMO on Dave Navarro's guitar, and this is some of the commercial ventures that I've done just to get it out there, really, to put myself back in association with SAMO and to re-own it and
and where can people find this?
Well, most of these are seasonal stuff that I've done in the past with New York State of Mind Clothing, New York State of Mind .com, and I also have done a whole lot of merch and different projects with House of Rue. House of Rue as ROULX, House of Rue, and they're in Massachusetts. We've had a really good work relationship for the last 3 or 4 years. Same with New York State of Mind Clothing. These people I trust, and they do excellent quality stuff. Print.
So at this point of the show, because we're winding down, first of all, I want to thank you so much, Al, for spending time with me and on behalf of the Museum of Graffiti crew and staff. Thank you. And as well for your contributions for being a pioneer and being there and at the beginning of 2 really important periods in art history. And so with that, thank you. And I want to invite our guests who are still with us before we wind down, if they have any questions to ask, please do so before we sign off.
Absolutely, and I appreciate your invitation. It's an honor to be here and to be recognized.
So one of the things, until I get a question, one of the things that was always interesting to me about SAMO was its strategic placement,
right?
Especially around Soho and East Village and near Castelli's Gallery, around all those 420 and all that when
Yeah,
those
420.
years.
Yeah. Actually, we got caught. Leo came out one day. He was so well dressed, and I was looking out. Jean wrote. I forgot what he wrote. It might have been like some some commentary on that particular art that was being shown. I forgot what he wrote, but Leo Castelli came out into the hall and said, "Why are you doing?" And he seemed so hurt. It wasn't like he was angry, but he was hurt. He was like, "Why are you doing this here?"
Aw.
In the 420, when it was all the big galleries.
Yo, I spent a lot of time in those galleries when I was a kid.
Did, yeah.
Especially Castelli's gallery, because I was good friends with two girls there, and they would let me claw all the portfolios, come to the openings, and
yeah.
It was wild. Those were wild days.
That's a certain privilege that only a New York kid could have. I mean,
yeah. No, I had kind of unprecedented access sometimes. I was just like, oh shit.
Yeah.
But that said, you know, it's interesting being on the outside of that, right? Being a graffiti writer, and yet this other world that wouldn't let us in, or we thought, until we created these alternate spaces.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing. It's mind-boggling, really, because I mean, one of the things that separated. I mean, me and Jean had completely different personalities. But one thing is that he was very at home. I mean, I grew up in a housing project, blue collar, and that whole world was kind of icky to me. I was like, these people, like. But so I was already causing my own separation. I created the gap just with that attitude. But to be involved in it now from the inside, it's unbelievable, really, because there was a time, and that's what I said about being ready, or being like at this age now I have the tolerance, the understanding to be in that world. But at that, a young guy, it just kind of gave me the creeps,
It's so weird for me. It was much more interesting when I was younger than it is now. And again, and I don't want to romanticize it, but all those old gallerists from that era, they were already ahead of the curve when they were younger and supporting some of the most important artists at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there was something about like, yo, we could do this, but you had to learn, accordingly to you have to talk to your constituents. They were.
I think that the thing of learning accordingly, I think is really, for me, it's really important, because having an understanding about stuff that can be really confusing and intimidating to a young person who might already think, when we're young, we think we know everything. But you don't, and then you find that out later, and it can be painful. It's just easier for me at this stage to navigate, because I don't have the wide-eyed optimism. Although I'm optimistic, but I don't have this kind of like, oh, that's great, and this kind of blind, or desire for crazy fame and all that stuff that. The romantic stuff,
Right. No, but you're an OG, right? Because you have the legacy to back it up, and also you have, more importantly, beyond Jean-Michel, you were a writer. You more importantly, I think,
Well, I certainly was. Yeah.
That in itself was far more, I think, for such a young kid, let's just say, because I'm not going to, try to draw parallels between SAMO and your writing, but for that period, for early graffiti, that was so avant-garde and revolutionary.
It was. In retrospect, and I mean, I knew we were doing something different. I knew that it was quite obvious. I mean, but it was, that's what we wanted to do. It wasn't like that self-conscious, like, oh, let's do something different. It was just, I want to do this,
Right.
Not because it's different, but it's because I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But
cool.
Yeah.
So Al, I'm gonna yeah, I'm going to leave you here. And again, on behalf of Museum of Graffiti, I want to thank you. And this will be on our IGTV on Instagram. So if you want to see it again or share it, you'll know where to find it. And so I want to thank you again. If you have any last minute shout outs, please do take the floor.
Just want to, yeah, shout out to like the team from Saturday, Wall Riders, House of Rue, New York State of Mind, my lady Mariah Fox Hausman, my family. There's always so many. Snake One, SJK 171, Mike 171. Oh, I don't know. There's too many people to give credit to, right?
Well, you know, you're all in spirit, right? And so Al, so I want to thank you again, and I want to let folks know that Greg LaMarche is going to be joining me on Thursday, SP1. That's going to be a really interesting conversation as well. And I hope you guys tune in and share the love. Let people know that we're doing these art talks.
Yes.
And this is all for the love of the culture and our history. And yeah, and so again, thank you for having the time to spend with us.
And thank you for inviting me. It's an absolute honor. Thank you so much.
You know,
be well, brother. Bye bye.
Okay, cuídate.
Igual.